Hello and welcome. We are so excited to have you join us for today's web conference. My name is Christine Patton. I am a Senior Research Analyst at Harvard Family Research Project, and I will be moderating today's event. The topic of today's web conference is creating a conversation about anywhere, anytime learning. Through a brief 10-minute overview of the current landscape and a 30-minute hosted panel discussion, we will address access and use of digital media for learning among children and families, community-wide initiatives to promote anywhere, anytime learning opportunities, and quality after-school programs that offer a pathway for positive youth development and educational success. A common thread throughout the entire event will be family engagement in child and youth learning. Today's host is Heather Weiss. Heather will be hosting a 30-minute panel discussion with Greg Baer, Terry Ferende, and Lori Takeuchi. Now that you know who is on the presenter side of the web conference, we want to know who is on the participant end. So I'm going to launch 2 quick polls to find out. So the first one is, where are you joining us from today? Great. And the second one is, what is the primary setting in which you work? Great, thank you. As an audience today, you represent a range of locations and settings, and we hope that our content is relevant for you all. And for those of you who want to make a clearer connection between your work and the work that we cover here, I encourage you to ask questions of our host and our panelists in the chat box and on Twitter. So as I mentioned, our host today is Heather Weiss. She is the founder and director of Harvard Family Research Project, and she has worked with our 3 panelists in a number of capacities. Before hosting a 30-minute discussion with them, she will be offering an overview of the field, and I'll now turn it over to Heather.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here with all of you, our panelists, and all of you joining through your various virtual devices. As Christine said, I've worked with our 3 panelists over the years. They are truly experts in the areas in which they work, and they are also what I think of as big thinkers as we move toward a world of anywhere, anytime learning. So I'm excited to have them be part of the conversation and share their experiences and ideas with all of us today. Looking through the list of people that registered for the webinar, we have a great group of people, and we're looking forward to your bringing your expertise to bear in the various ways that we can interact together now and in the future. HFRP has been trying to create and build the conversation on anywhere, anytime learning over the last year. Why? Why have we been doing that? Start with a provocative question. Education equals schools, right or wrong? In the mindset of many people, in fact, the assumption is that K through 12 schools are the only place where and when children learn. And as we'll present a little bit today, and you can read in ours and others' work, the data on when and where children learn says no, K through 12 schools are certainly a very important place, but not the only place where children learn. When we look at time, most of us have about 6,000 hours awake. For kids, 1,000 of those hours on average are in school. That leaves roughly 5,000 hours where kids can learn in a variety of places. And what the data on where kids learn, how they learn, when they learn, increasingly shows they're learning in a range of places. The ecology of learning, if you will, is changing dramatically as a function of a variety of the things that we'll be hearing about today. So when we think about where kids learn, we come up with a list that includes the following kinds of things. As you look at this list, where else would you add? What have we missed? What do you see in terms of, in your community, your state, places where kids learn that will help us build out this list? As we move to a better understanding and a mindset individually and in our organizations that says kids learn in a whole variety of places, we're facing, I think, a number of challenges. One is, how do we change the mindsets of individuals and organizations to broaden their understanding of when, where, how, why kids learn? We're watching a big shift in this country, and I think globally as well, to more emphasis on learning and less on the institutions where kids learn, whether it be schools, after-school programs, or whatever. More emphasis on kids learning and on personalized learning opportunities. So we need to think carefully about how we're going to meet the challenge of helping people change the mindsets to this kind of understanding and emphasis on kids and learning. We also have a challenge of building connections among learning opportunities to maximize the value and access to learning opportunities for all kids and families. So we don't want more siloed institutions. We really have to be thinking about the challenge of how do we make the connections in a variety of ways to really connect the learning opportunities so that they're accessible and high quality. We also have, and we'll be talking a bit about this today, big equity challenges. The data are pretty clear that not all kids have access not just to high quality schools, but also to high quality out-of-school learning opportunities. I think the last big challenge, and we'll be talking about it, I hope, amongst the panelists and also with the participants today, is how do we imagine, how do we continue to build and imagine what this new in and out-of-school learning ecology is going to look like. So HFRP has been trying to put together ideas, materials, and conversations through our fine newsletters, through webinars like this, to help build the conversation. We hope you'll share your work and ideas in the course of today and in the future. People call this new arena new learning ecology, expanded, extended, connected, complementary learning. There are many labels for this broader view of what's happening with respect to learning. All of those labels are useful. I don't think we need to get stuck on labels. I think we need to be thinking about how we're going to move to this broader understanding and high quality access, again, to in and out of school learning opportunities for everybody. We want to touch on, as always, family engagement, but we're going to be looking today at digital media, at community-based learning opportunities, and after school, and to sort of get you thinking about these different arenas. First of all, it's clear that we can use digital media to support learning in many places: home, school, early childhood programs, libraries. The virtuality of it means that it's not bound to place. It can happen everywhere, a key part of anywhere, anytime learning. When we look at the data on what's happening with respect to it, what we're finding is there's been a big increase in just a few years in the number of families with children 8 and under that own smartphone or smart mobile devices. There's really been a huge increase, as you can see from this slide. Similarly, in terms of people who own access to a tablet. So we're watching this move virtually to anywhere, anytime learning happen at a big clip. When we look at the amount of time kids are spending with digital media and learning, kids under 8 are spending about an hour, almost 2 hours now. whereas older kids, 8 to 18, are at about 7.5 hours. And again, this digital media use is across learning environments. It could be home, it could be school, it could be the library, it could be the bus stop. But we're really watching our kids develop virtual lives with the related challenges for how, as adults, we're going to try to help them shape their digital media experiences so that they genuinely support learning. As the next slide suggests, there are important differences in access and use by income. So there are big access and equity issues we all need to be thinking about. We're making progress in terms of at least commitment to and sometimes actual fairly widespread access to broadband and to hardware. We also have to address access issues around guidance from parents and adults with respect to making sure that their kids use digital media as an important learning tool to support their achievement and learning in and out of school, build their curiosity, their creativity, their problem solving, all the things that some research suggests digital media, when well used, can contribute to. So we see anywhere, anytime learning is on the rise as community organizations and institutions take on and support family and community engagement for kids' learning and development. And Greg and the other panelists will be talking more about what they see with respect to this. We also know from the out-of-school perspective, parents are telling us in a survey done a few years ago that is going to be updated with new data tomorrow, and Terry will be talking about this. The Afterschool Alliance does 5-year surveys, and they are releasing a new one tomorrow that will update some of the data on parents' views and use of after school. But we know, based on what we have from 2007, that parents are interested and want their kids to have access to after school, say there should be some type of organized activity or place for kids to go after school. We also know that about 15% of all students attend after-school programs, but the data that will be presented tomorrow through the Afterschool Alliance's new report will suggest that that number is also on the increase. So we know there's a demand for after-school, but our supply does not yet meet that demand. So the after-school community is addressing that, and again, Terry will be talking more about that. So you can see we have big challenges in anywhere, anytime learning, and our panelists, and I hope you participants, are going to take them on.
Thanks, Heather. The next time that we hear from Heather, she'll be joined via video feed. Our three panelists are Greg Baer, who is the Executive Director of the Grable Foundation and manages a grant-making portfolio that advances high-quality early childhood education, improved teaching and learning in public schools, and robust out-of-school time support. Greg will be joined by Terry Ferende Dunham, who is a partner at Collaborative Communications Group. For more than a decade, Terry has been connecting leaders and practitioners in and out of school. She has contributed to the building of an after-school field through her work at the C.S. Mott Foundation, the Wallace Foundation, the Afterschool Alliance, the National After-School Association, and other national, state, and local after-school programs and intermediaries. They'll also be joined by Lori Takeuchi, who is the Senior Director and a Research Scientist at the Jones Gann Cooney Center. A learning scientist by training, she conducts research on how children use technology across the various settings of their lives. At the end of their discussion, Heather will be asking the panelists for their takeaways. We ask that you also think about your own takeaways and share them with us on Twitter and in the open chat that we'll be launching later on in the event. And as questions arise for you as you listen to the conversation, please send them in via the chat box for us to ask during the audience Q&A. Greg, Terry, and Lori, welcome. Heather, I'm turn it back over to you as our panelists get their webcam launched.
Thank you, Christine. In our conversation today with Lori and Greg and Terry, we're going to look at their ideas about the current landscape and opportunities for anywhere, anytime learning, what their sense is of things that need to be changed in practice and in policy and in other areas, how those changes could be made. They're also going to tell us what their organizations are doing with respect to anywhere, anytime learning, and share their vision of what a new learning ecology in the future might look like. So with that, I'd like to start with Terry. Would you be willing to talk to us a little bit about how you see the current landscape of opportunities for anywhere, anytime learning overall and with respect to after school?
Terry, you're muted right now. If you can just unmute yourself and start over from the beginning so that we all have an opportunity to hear what you were saying.
So apologies. Thank you, Heather. It's an honor to be here. Can you hear me now, just to confirm?
You can.
Yep, go for it.
Just want to reinforce what you're saying. We are on the brink of something really important where we'll see some data coming out tomorrow. That's a household survey of parents that tells us some great data, which I hope everyone will use and watch the After School Alliance for the actual numbers. But again, to reinforce, there's more demand than ever before for after-school programs. Young people are participating in record numbers. Parents have increased satisfaction with programs. And across the board, there's increased public support for public funding for programs. So what that tells us, of course, is that people know that these learning spaces outside of school are important. They're willing to participate. They're willing to put their children there, and they're willing to fund it. But we know we have a long way to go. I work with the 47 statewide after-school networks that are building policy and partnerships for quality, sustainable after-school programs. And they know from their experience that young people are on wait lists all over America to get into programs. Nationwide, less than a third of young people have access to programs. And so there's some real equity issues here as we talk about the opportunity gap. And we know that higher income parents are outspending their lower income peers 8 to 1 on those activities outside of school, enrichment activities, those activities that help students explore their passions, go deeper in different topics that really they care about, and then spark learning. A little bit more on the landscape, I want to just say it's definitive that after-school programs work. I think that we've closed the door on that chapter. We've got evidence now, and we've got websites about it that I'm happy to share, that after-school programs have evidence of closing the achievement gap in math scores, particularly, but in other spaces as well, that after-school programs are closing the opportunity gap by providing all kinds of amazing learning opportunities in STEM and all kinds of things, and build success schools. I think this is one of our horizon points, too, of really talking about after-school programs and summer learning programs, are building success schools, non-cognitive skills, whatever you want to call them, but these kinds of skills that really prepare young people for college and careers. Again, happy to talk more, but I'll want to hear from everyone else as well.
Thank you. Greg, I know it would be great if you would share your experience in Pittsburgh building community-based learning opportunities, after-school, weekends, summer, across an array of institutions, so that we can kind of illustrate the kind of thing we're talking about with a strong community example.
Thank you, Heather. It's an honor to be here and together with the other panelists and all of our friends across the country. So on one hand, Pittsburgh is a very typical American city. Like a lot of other cities during the past decade, we've focused a lot on systems building in the early childhood space, in the after-school space, among mentoring programs, in summer learning. But what's perhaps novel about what's happening in Pittsburgh, particularly as it relates to learning innovation generally, is something that we affectionately call the Kids in Creativity Network. So over the past 7 years, we've built a network that now stands at 2,000 people representing 200 organizations. These people themselves are librarians and teachers and youth workers, but they're also gamers and technologists and roboticists, all of whom are working commonly to rethink what learning looks like and how we reach who today's kids are, knowing how very differently they learn. And so how does that happen in a school? How does that happen in a library, in a museum, in an after-school program, in their online experiences? And so we have this network that's truly working to remake learning. One good example, we now have something called the Digital Learning Core. And so you can think about mentors and the importance of highly trained quality mentors and the presence of mentors in those lives. Think about paid mentors who themselves are engineers, roboticists, and others trained in free and openly sourced softwares like MIT's Scratch program or CMU's Alice program, and that they themselves are going into economically underprivileged communities and the libraries in those communities, the schools in those communities, the church basements in those communities, and holding coding programs and all sorts of fun summer robotics programs. And so finding ways to connect organizations using digital tools, using maker learning practices. We love to talk about STEAM around here, so we're attentive to STEM, but we think it's important to integrate the arts with the STEM education. And we're finding, again, that schools, museums, and libraries are wholly reinventing who they are and are attracting new kids to participate and then meaningfully contributing to their learning outcomes, embracing this idea that kids are learning everywhere all the time.
Thank you, Greg. Lori, this is a perfect segue to you to talk about how you see digital media supporting kids' learning in various settings.
Okay, so I feel like I'll be somewhat redundant of what you how you introduced us, Heather. But I think from my perspective at the Cooney Center, there are two aspects of the landscape that I think we really need to focus on in terms of opportunity, and one of them is, of course, media and technology, and parents and caregivers, which I think really go hand in hand. I think a lot of people think that new technologies are what are really going to enable this anytime, anywhere learning, thanks to their mobility and their connectivity. And the fact, as Heather, you mentioned, that kids are spending so much time with screen media. For younger kids, as you mentioned, it's 2 hours per day. And of course, the figure is high for older kids. Now, in theory, this means that a child can port a learning resource wherever he goes, from home to school to after school. But in practice, we know that this isn't always happening. First of all, because students are often not allowed to bring devices between home and school. And we also know that not all kids have mobile devices, and those who do have them aren't always connected, which is why I kind of want to highlight the role of some of the more established forms of media. I guess I can say this because I'm the technology person in the group. So it's the more established forms of media such as television, books, and video games. Because these media have been around for a while, they're more established in family entertainment routines, and we know from recent surveys that the Cooney Center has conducted that parents and kids are both avid users of these media. Parents and kids are spending way more time watching TV and playing video games and reading books than using tablets and cell phones together. So even in this digital age, I do think it's important to keep these more tried and true forms of media in mind as we think about anytime, anywhere learning. Okay, so on to parents and caregivers. Of course, to make best use of technological tools, kids really need good guides, and Heather, you mentioned this in your introduction. We know from research conducted in the 70s and 80s that kids learn more from educational TV when they watch with an adult. The adult helps the kids focus the child's attention on what matters most, and can also bring additional information to the activity than if the child were just watching alone or playing alone. And the same applies to newer forms of media, whether they be apps, the internet, and so on. So again, technology and parents, I think, really go hand in hand.
So I'm interested in pursuing that for just a minute with the other panelists, and that's pursuing the question, what is the family role in anywhere, anytime learning as you see it? And we know about the role around digital media. What do you think the role is with respect to after school and also, Greg, in your case, with respect to sort of some of the community learning opportunities that you're providing in Pittsburgh. So Terry, if you would speak a little bit about after school, and then Greg talk about this in Pittsburgh, it'd be great.
Sure, thanks, Heather. I think, finding the right fit for a child to meet all of their needs in terms of their interests and passions and the skills building they might need to increase their academic performance and interest and engagement in school. So finding the right opportunities in summer and after school is a critical choice. But bridging after school, summer, and family and the learning opportunities that happen is also critical. So, I think it's going to the vision questions. I know we're kind of going back and forth. As having a vision where you're looking at a personalized learning plan for your child that spans grades, ages, settings, educators, and learning supports is really important.
Greg, would you follow up on that?
So Heather, I think you would agree with me that you'd be hard-pressed to find a parent or a caregiver who doesn't want amazing, wonderful opportunities for their children. And so part of this, I think parents are already embracing it. I mean, it's new language, but for time immemorial, they've probably embraced anywhere, anytime learning. The way that we think about it here is how do we identify those trusted adults in parents and caregivers' lives? So the pediatricians, the principals in the schools, the librarians, the church leader, whomever it might be, and equip those individuals with information so that they can help be the guides to the adults for the children. So the way that you would think of a tour guide if you are visiting a new city, or you'd go down to the concierge desk if you're staying at the hotel, and you'd ask someone, help me navigate my way around. And now how is it we're working hard to prepare principals, to prepare pediatricians and other trusted adults with the information so that they can say, wow, your child seems to be really interested in robotics. Here's a whole myriad of programs, exhibits, opportunities, classes in our region that you might take advantage of. Or your kid's really interested in coding, and really genuinely trying to create learning pathways and supporting then the institutions in making those handoffs easier. And so, for example, we've placed fellows in the Carnegie Libraries of Pittsburgh. They have some maker spaces in the libraries, and those individuals know well the other maker opportunities in the community. So if a child visits the North Side branch of the Carnegie Library, well, just down the street is the Make Shop at the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. And so how do we have those handoffs between institutions in supporting the parents and caregivers to build upon the learning interests of their kids?
So building on that, and Terry, you alluded to the question that would be great if each of you would talk about what's your vision for what things might look like in 5 years, and what are some of the things it's going to take to get there. We've talked about personalized learning plans. We've talked about learning pathways literally in terms of the pathway from one learning opportunity to another that you alluded to, Greg, but also conceptually the pathway that is represented in a personalized learning plan. So we know I think we're in consensus, we're aiming to something that looks like that. What needs to change in communities and in local, state, and national policy to get us to a point where that kind of personalized learning supported by institutions and supported by families is a reality? So Terry, if you would start, that would be great, and then Lori and Greg, with kind of your vision of what it's going to take for us to get there.
Sure. We're calling our vision here Span Learning, connecting students to a world of learning spanning across schools, homes, and communities. And I would sum it up in 3 quick things. One is more and better after-school and summer learning opportunities, increasing digital access and support, and then empowering students and families with data. I'm happy to go into more detail there, but I think if we kind of figure these things out and how they intersect and engage with one another, we'll have a new vision where kids have more opportunities to learn all the time and get credit for that learning.
So as we think about this personalized learning and pathway notion, you're really underscoring the importance of access, but also on data to guide progress along that pathway. Is that fair to say?
It is fair, and this idea of students and families owning their own data and really being able to track what kids learn, where, the skills and knowledge that they're are accessing and getting. Some of our statewide after-school networks are doing some really groundbreaking work within their states with their state departments of education on competency-based education, on gaining academic credits from outside of school experiences. Other places, like in California, they're doing great work with linked learning, doing internships and other community and work-based learning experiences for young people.
Great.
And then badges is another thing.
Yeah, I want to, before we get to badges, Lori, could you add your thoughts?
Sure. So I just want to mention a little of the research that we've been conducting recently with parents, both in surveys and ethnographic research. We're finding that parents, many parents, not all parents, there are definitely parents but there are parents who don't feel like they know enough to be able to be effective guides in their children's learning. For example, and in particular, parents from lower income and Latino families in particular say that they would like to have more information about educational media choices, or they just don't feel like they have enough information to be able to be effective guides for their children. So what I want to say in terms of my vision for what anytime, anywhere learning should look like, it's not so much that every child has a device or that they're connected, but that parents are aware of their important roles and influences and that they feel both equipped and capable to be their child's guides at home. And that the lines of communication between parents and providers are as open and free-flowing as they are within a parent's own personal social networks. Another question we asked in our survey was whether parents were, oh, sorry, I'm getting off track. And finally, just that the stories that propel children's interests, from school to home to after school, can just flow fluidly across these settings. So I didn't want to go on too long. So
great. And Greg?
So Heather, in your opening comments, you talked about the focus on the learner rather than institutions, and I 100% agree with that. That said, I'm going to focus on the institutions because there are two shifts in mindset that I think that we need. One, in the out-of-school space, there's quite frankly just the continuing unsexy work of quality. And what does quality look like in early learning? What does quality look like in after school? What does quality look like in summer learning? We can't lose the very laser-like focus on quality, but add to it this sensibility of whether you call it linked learning or deeper learning, or you use phrases like digital, maker, STEAM, whatever they are. It's that curiosity and understanding about the learning sciences, what we're learning about learning, and how kids are engaged and attracted differently than any previous generation. On the side of schools, we need a true mind shift change in schools, and it's why I spoke a moment ago to how does a principal, for example, think about his or her leadership very differently, and being that tour guide for families to say, not only do we have these opportunities here or these teachers here, but we have resources for learning across our community. How do schools begin to think very differently about their roles as facilitators, not just the teachers themselves, but the organizations and the institutions?
Thank you. Could you each talk a little bit about what your specific things your organizations are doing? I think, Greg, you used the term, the unsexy work. Whether it's sexy or unsexy, we have to get from here to there, from kind of, I think, a lot of very interesting emerging things that are happening to the vision that we're talking about. So I'm interested to hear specific things that you're doing that the participants in the webinar could be thinking about doing in their own organization or their community. So would each of you, Greg, perhaps you could start, and then Terry and Lori, with some specific things for folks in the audience to think about.
Well, I'll continue with my line of unsexy thinking. So one is just rallying support for intermediaries, for leadership organizations in the community. At the Grable Foundation, and together with other colleague foundations, as well as a national partner in the MacArthur Foundation, we've supported a series of intermediaries in this community to which then a school district, a museum, libraries, others can turn for different types of support. So one are small grants that might allow them to take a risk and test with or maker learning practices or different types of professional development. Two is just work of bringing people together. So these intermediaries are supported to hold conferences, events, lunch and learns, events. One. Third, and support. So how is it that you can stir the pot and send large delegations of people, as we've tried to do here in Pittsburgh, off to MIT to the Sandbox Summit or to the Digital Media and Learning Conference, or events that Terry and Lori and their organizations may be hosting across the country. So a lot of it is just what we regard and we hope is very high quality professional development that's supported with unexpected learning opportunities, chances to learn from peers, and money to actually then start to support some of the testing, but then the working capital to make things happen.
One that I would make a quick editorial comment, Greg, that one of the themes that I hear emerging in this is that we all are learners. It's no longer just kids that are learning and we're adults teaching kids. We're making a major shift now to co-learning, and in my case, to learning how to use some of the things on my smartphone, 4-year-olds. So another part of the shift that's taking place here is adults continuing to learn, the professional development emphasis, the taking risk, those kinds of things. It seems like it's a part of this shift.
And if my panelists will forgive me to just jump in there. So yeah, we've focused a lot on the adults, and we've funded actual physical spaces, professional development rooms incorporated with local educational service agencies, into which educators at all levels can come and comfortably learn what a 3D printer is, test out some new apps, play with a makey-makey, whatever it is, those environments that for them are safe and comfortable before they expose their lack of knowledge to the kids who know better, quite frankly.
Great. Thank you. Terry?
Well, everything that Greg just said about quality and professional development is happening at a state level in different ways at different entry points in the states. So I'll add in policy and funding and telling your story. So they're all tied together, but we're really urging programs, schools, communities to tell their story of what's working with kids to make the case to increase funding and remove barriers. To the educators, I saw a number of educators on the webinar, to really look out at the community as a space for learning. So it's really a mind shift change that we're trying to make to show that community settings have valid learning opportunities. And for families, not connecting the dots, but also just creating every good opportunity for learning, whether it's with or without digital devices. One of my favorites is Wonderopolis, the National Center for Family Literacy, Families Learning Together, really puts out a great tool that just gives us questions every day to ask our kids and explore really deep learning questions, kind of the modern day dinner conversation, if you will.
Thank you. Lori?
So at the CUNY Center, we're doing 3 things generally. First of all, we're conducting research on these very issues of bridging and anytime, anywhere learning. We're translating this research for practitioners and parents. And we're trying to connect researchers with developers of technology products and content. So in terms of the research we're conducting, we just finished conducting ethnographic studies of Latino families living in the New York City area, research that's been generously funded by the Heising Simons Foundation, to understand how kids ages 6 to 9 are using digital media across the many settings that they spend time in. So this includes how they're using mobile devices between settings and at home and at school, which actually we're seeing they're not using digital media much at school, and how and when they're using these media to learn in particular, and also very importantly the roles that their parents are playing, whether they're aware or not, in their kids learning with and around these media. That's one example of the type of research we're doing. Another study that I just finished, actually we're about to publish, is a survey of teachers, K-8 teachers, and how they're using digital games in the classroom. So, okay, sorry. And that's kind of an interesting case. It's not, it's actually in school learning, but the idea is bringing video games, which is typically thought of as a home-based activity, into school, and trying to understand just what teachers' perceptions of video games are, how they're actually using them with their and we're translating this research so that developers, I'm writing this report so that developers can actually make use of this information and design learning games that teachers are going to better be able to, or more easily be able to integrate into their instruction. And another product that I want to tell you about is a guide that we are producing for parents on how to use apps with their children. So based on this research that we're conducting with the ethnographic research that I told you about, as well as survey research that we've done with parents, we're translating that information into actual step-by-step information on how a parent can most effectively use educational apps, or any apps, doesn't have to be educational necessarily, with their children.
Thank you. I'd like to get each of you thinking about, we talked earlier about the personalized learning plan pathways and some of the kinds of shifts that need to happen for those to become realities for kids, to get away from this notion that just schools where kids learn to the schools certainly, again, very important, sort of necessary but not sufficient kind of an argument. I'm interested in your thoughts about the institutional shifts at the community or whatever level that will facilitate beginning to create this vision that we've talked about. And I know badges came up earlier in the conversation. That's an example which perhaps either Terry or Greg you could talk about. What are some of the other kinds of shifts that begin to build some connections so the customer, if you will, is not having to make all the connections him or herself? There's an array of institutional supports for a child and family that really do create sort of a connected learning ecology. So, Greg, if you want to talk about badges, and then Terry, add you about other connections and leading edge things you know of that are happening out there. They may not be universal, but really interesting things you see about building connections amongst these learning processes. And then, Lori, your thoughts on how to build those connections.
So, Heather, I think about this question in a very personal way. I have 2 young daughters, and when they graduate from high school many years from now, I can imagine that they'll have graduated from a brick-and-mortar high school and maybe have earned a diploma the way that I did. But if we haven't arrived at the point where they've earned, whether it's digital badges or different types of certificates that honor the sort of learning that they've achieved in summer camps, in museum exhibit programs, in their online experiences, whatever it might be, then I feel like not only will I have let them down, but we'll probably have let all kids down. One of the reasons I love the conversation about badges is because it's a new way of thinking about credentialing, essentially. How is it that we honor and recognize the skills, competencies, dispositions that kids are learning in all of the types of environments that we are discussing today, the way that they themselves value and that schools might value, that potential workplaces might value, and that would be portable and stackable in a way that would be constructive and helpful to them. And that's what badges are. And to me, badges is a gateway to opening up a much broader conversation that is very nascent about how we think differently about credentialing.
Terry, your thoughts?
Well, again, agreeing with all of what Greg said and thinking this really is our vision moving forward, and not to leave out this idea of Carnegie Unit and credit-bearing opportunities outside of school are also really valid and make learning relevant and give over age or undercredited an opportunity to catch up and reach graduation. And so it's another important opportunity. But I also want to just say that I think creating a community-wide vision for learning is so important, and I'm so impressed with the work in Providence and Nashville and some of the other cities where the mayors have taken over this broader vision of learning, not taken it over, but facilitated it in their communities to really create a space where all of the community institutions can come together and think about what that means, and then create a seamless web for kids to move in and among learning opportunities in the community, and then, as Greg's saying, have badges and get credit for that learning.
Terry, could you also speak for a minute about any innovation you see on conversations across learning in the school day and after school and summer, sort of more high-touch relationships among providers in those spaces that support an array of learning opportunities for kids?
Well, one thing that's just coming to mind now, and I guess I want to, maybe I'll preview with something I was thinking of in terms of a takeaway. As we look at one-to-one rollouts, a lot of people think of anytime, anywhere learning around this technology space. I'd really be urging people to follow the lead of the most innovative communities who are thinking of one-to-one rollouts not as just instructional devices between the teacher and the kid, but how could those devices change our narratives between families and communities and after-school programs? And how do we, if kids are bringing home iPads or computers, or how do we make sure that they're able to be used and not completely locked down for after-school programs, for example, to do make videos or something like that, or for families to access resources that they might not have the ability to access. So I think this conversation around that's tied to the massive investment that districts are making in one-to-one devices should really be very thoughtful and community-wide.
Thank you, Terry. I would say here that particularly around family engagement, some incredibly innovative stuff is going on with smartphones, with daily messaging on what kids are doing, teachers videoing kids doing things so their parents can see what they're doing in school. I mean, I think the frontier of those devices in terms of communication, we're just beginning to explore, but I think there's a lot of really interesting creative things going on, and I think some evaluation of how they're working in that space as well. Lori, would you share your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, this is addressing the question that was sent to us, I think, how can communities and other organizations promote anytime, anywhere learning? And I kind of want to sort of highlight the job that libraries are doing a really good job of, and I kind of wanted to address libraries because I wanted to get at issues of access and technology, and I think that libraries have been doing a particularly admirable job of promoting anytime anywhere learning, but for them this is like nothing new, right? They've been doing this since they started by lending out books. That was their first and original purpose. But today, libraries are doing some really interesting things to reach families from disadvantaged populations by doing things like lending out e-readers, and even there's a library, I think it's in Bronx, that is actually lending out internet hotspots, right? So in a lot of families, we know they actually have the devices, they have the tablets, or they have the iPods, but they don't necessarily have the internet access, and the internet is really how they're actually able to connect. And so libraries are actually lending out, a family can go and check a hotspot home so that they have internet access at home, so that children who do have, who do have laptops from school can actually have an internet connection at home and do their homework on their laptop as they're supposed to. So just wanted to put in a plug for the great work that libraries are doing.
Thank you.
So, Heather, can I add to that?
Yeah.
Because libraries are proving themselves to be remarkably inventive. They're also allowing kids to check out robots and robot kits. They're allowing kids to check out making tools so that you could take tools home to help build things and make things in concert with the maker movement. I think we're seeing some really exciting things in libraries nationwide.
Thank you. Now, this is a chance now for people to, based on our conversation and your thinking both prior to this and during the conversation, your takeaways. Terry, would you start with your takeaway?
Well, my one takeaway was follow those one-to-one rollouts and see how you can use those as an entry point for conversation. And then second, please use this data that's coming out now to build the case for after-school programs so we can increase access for more kids.
Thank you. Greg?
I'd say we all should have a mindset of focusing on the learner. And in particular, as we think about a learner, think about a kid in a setting that doesn't have access to many of the types of tools or resources that we discussed. Because if we can get it right for that kid and provide the right sorts of tools for his or her parents or caregivers, for the teachers in his life, for the other organizations, we're going to get it right for everyone.
Thank you. Lori?
So if it's okay, it's not so much a takeaway as a reflection. So Joan Cooney, who's my company's namesake, she conceived of Sesame Street way back in 1968 because she knew that kids were spending hours of their day watching TV. So why not make some of it educational? But it had to be as entertaining as it was educational, otherwise it just wouldn't stand a chance. Today, the kids' TV landscape is 100 times more cluttered than it was in Mrs. Cooney's day, but kids are still watching the TV show 45 years later. So I think that one of the keys to the show's success is that it never tried to bring school into the home. It did something totally unique for its time, and I think we need to do more of that type of groundbreaking, innovative thinking today while still building upon the really strong resources that have always been at our disposal. And as I think I've tried to emphasize today, that would be parents.
Thank you. This is great. I mean, in my wrap-up, I like all of the things that you guys said, the emphasis on equity, the emphasis on creativity, the emphasis on some distinctions across learning spaces at the same time we connect them. So we're not trying to make home school, we're trying to support learning in both. And presumably in an anywhere, anytime learning world, there's lots of different places you can learn, different kinds of people you can learn with, different ways you can learn. And we want to make sure that as part of this individualized, personalized world we're trying to create with its pathways, that there are multiple kinds of learning opportunities and ways to learn. So I appreciate the reflections and thoughts and ideas of three very creative people. You guys, as well as I think the participants in the webinar, are creative thinkers on the frontier. So thank you so much for this. And now we're gonna open it up to some questions for you from the people that are participating in the webinar.
Well, I want to make sure, as Heather said, that we have a chance for our audience to ask questions of our panelists, as Heather has the opportunity to do so. So I invite everyone to use the Q&A box to continue asking questions. We've seen a lot of great questions come in, and I want you to keep asking them. While you're typing, I want to make two notes. One, an archive of the webinar will be posted on hfrp.org next week. I also want to tell you what is going to happen after the Q&A. So first, we'll be launching a survey, and we're going to be doing that as part of your webinar experience. So we'd love your feedback on today's event so that we can use it to inform future web conferences. And after the survey launches, we'll be asking you to rejoin us here, as we'll be opening up the chat box and making it public, so that during that time you'll be welcome to share your own takeaways, ask questions, and connect with each other, as well as our panelists and our hosts as well. So we'll give you just another few seconds to continue asking your questions before we take our first one. So I have the first question from our audience member, and this is for all of our panelists as well as our host, Heather, if she wants to answer. We heard from the panelists that they encourage the use of learning pathways to connect families to multiple resources in multiple settings. How do we help entities connect who might not be connected? What are some opportunities for that to happen, and strategies that you all know of to make communities connected communities?
This is Heather, and I would offer a quick one, and that's that we have parent-teacher conference tip sheets, which we're now in the process of revising, so that part of the parent-teacher conference conversation between family and and teacher is around the out-of-school learning opportunities that the child is using or might be interested in using as a way for schools to acknowledge and help families understand the value of and get access to learning opportunities that are individualized for that child. Other thoughts?
Yeah, perhaps I misunderstood the question, but apart from investing in an infrastructure that supports the educators and professionals in connecting with one another across institutions, one of the things in which we've invested heavily is the documentation of this work in written, video, and photographic form, but also providing funding for extensive marketing of the work and storytelling, essentially, through online magazines, the public radio station, public television, some weeklies that get into different audiences and neighborhoods. And part of that goal is to increase the utility of what these opportunities are and to inform parents and caregivers, but also the principals and pediatricians. But it's also provided a sense of motivation on the part of the organizations to say, wow, I had no idea they were doing it at that library across town. We can be doing that at our library. And so that sort of public coverage is really important to this work.
And a follow-up question from another audience member that relates to this but focuses specifically in on libraries. An audience member asked, how do we encourage parents and youth to take advantage of the libraries in their communities or outside of their communities?
This is Carrie. I just want to say one thing that, I think having these kind of interconnected conversations with principals and teachers and those trusted members of the community, as Greg said, pediatricians and others, about the range of opportunities where learning happens, including libraries, and this idea where libraries are really, not your grandmother's library anymore. We've got to keep getting the word out and have those trusted advisors know that, experience it, and share it with their parents and families.
I agree. I think that just, again, based on some of the research, survey research that we've conducted, we know that parents really look to teach their children's teachers a lot. So just to make teachers aware of the library resources and then somehow communicate that information through their children or something they send home with their children to let them know about these opportunities. Because, again, as Terry said, I don't think that people even know what is available. I mean, I didn't know about that hotspot thing until I talked to somebody from the library. So it's information that needs to get out there in a bigger way.
If I may, I'd add, again, think of the kids first, right? So kids walk with they move with they vote with their feet, right? So if the place is attractive to kids, they'll want to be there. IMLS and the MacArthur Foundation, among others, in addition to regional funders, have supported all sorts of innovations in children's sections of libraries as well as teen spaces. And I think the smarter libraries have opened themselves up to partnerships with hip-hop organizations and local filmmakers and created a wholly different learning environment in the library setting itself. I can tell you the Carnegie Library System here in Pittsburgh has done that. And as one example, the East Liberty Neighborhood Library, they've seen a 21% increase in just the last year among youth. And a 62% increase in book circulation among youth, because the kids are there, they want to hang out, they start messing around, and if you suddenly want to write a song or do a film project you have in your neighborhood, well then you've got to prepare, you're activated to learn differently.
I want to just follow up quickly. Greg mentioned IMLS. That's the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences. It's a federal agency. In partnership with foundations, most recently in partnership with the MacArthur Foundation, they really have been reinventing the library, so it is not, as Terry said, your grandmother's library anymore. Their website is full of resources that I think people would find helpful.
Great, and another audience member asked, we all know that there are community spaces and institutions within communities and national institutions who provide services to families and children who are doing some things to increase and engage children and family opportunities in the anywhere, anytime learning arena. how can institutions and programs who want to do more do more? What opportunities and resources are there for them to increase their capacity and to do more with what they have? And the audience members particularly asked if there are any funding opportunities to be aware of.
Well, this is Greg. I mean, I work on behalf of a foundation, and I try and talk plainly about money. I just think it would depend on the local, regional sources and the local funding, community, corporate, and otherwise. But I think it's also thinking beyond just typical access to resources. I'll give you two very concrete examples. The Fred Rogers Company here in Pittsburgh, which for a long time produced Fred Rogers Neighborhood and now Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, among others, work together with the Port Authority system, which is our bus system, to create literacy games that were plastered at bus stops all around town, taking advantage of the waiting time that a parent and a caregiver have together to practice words and play literacy games. Similarly, first grade teachers at a charter school worked with technologists at a company to develop digital math blocks, trying to design a product that was the equivalent of a book, the way a child might read together with an adult. What is the math equivalent to that? So sometimes it's actual resources, money, but sometimes it's thinking differently about partnerships to create some new products or services that stimulate learning.
And also, I think bring in non-traditional partners like the transportation service.
Yeah. And we talk sometimes about after-school and summer learning programs being a solution or an opportunity or a vehicle to learning opportunities. And so as communities or neighborhoods are interested in different issues, maybe there's a real push for college readiness in your community, the after-school program is a great way to partner with the colleges or whomever to advance those community goals. And so really positioning after-school or summer learning programs as part of the solution to help your kids graduate on time or develop certain skills is really important.
Great, thank you. And we have time for one more question. A lot of audience members are eager to continue to learn from you all and from your institutions. And one participant asked how they can find out about the conferences that you all and your institutions are hosting and presenting at. If you can speak to how to find out information about how to stay connected with you and your ideas, that would be great.
So this is Lori from the Cooney Center. If you just go to our website, we have lots of information, and it's all free for download. Our website is just joanganscooneycenter.org. And again, everything that we're a nonprofit, we're based here at Sesame Workshop, but everything we do is for the broader field. We do inform what happens to some extent on Sesame Street, but really we're here to connect communities and schools and researchers and technology developers and so many more people other than just Sesame Street. So please go to our website and check out the many things that we have free for people just like you.
This is Terry. I work with so many organizations. I'll just kind of rattle off a few and some great conferences that people should be connected to. The After School Alliance website is full of great resources. We have another website, expandinglearning.org, where there's a lot of the research and including all of the articles in a 400-plus page compendium on expanding minds and opportunities about how after school works. The Wallace Foundation has a fantastic knowledge center with a lot of research and information on best practices for city systems. The National After School Association conference is coming up in March in collaboration with the After School for All Challenge. It's a great experience to get deep on after school and issues of quality and things like that. And the Families Learning Summit by the National Council on Families Learning is a great experience, too, to think about families learning, to name a few.
And from a local Pittsburgh perspective, but that will be relevant to anyone anywhere, the website pittsburgh.org has on it an events section, among other things. And you'll see listed there not only Pittsburgh-specific events, but the sort of events, conferences, webinars, and others that we're trying to alert local educators, librarians, technologists, and others about some of the very things that Terry and Lori just mentioned, because we want to stir the pot with great thinking from elsewhere as we endeavor to improve learning situations here locally.
Great, thank you, Alan. We'll be sharing a couple of those links at the end of the webinar as well. We're going to have a couple of those pop up on our one of our last slides. So we're going to turn it over to a survey right now before we go into open that up. And I'm sending everyone over to the survey right now, but for those of you who have a pop-up blocker on or whose computers prevent the survey from automatically popping up, please click on or copy and paste the survey link on the slide. So the survey should take you a minute or two to complete, and we'll be silent during that time. And after you finish, please join us back here on Adobe Connect for our open peer-to-peer chat. So we'll give you a minute or two to complete that.
This is Terry. If you'll stay on the chat, I'm happy to keep feeding resources and answering the questions I saw coming in.